Hello, this recording is designed for educators and support staff working with SEND learners enrolled on the NCFE Level 1-2 Technical Award in Music Technology. We will dive deeper into effective strategies to ensure all learners can thrive in this exciting qualification. This recording will support key areas such as adapting the curriculum, where you can discover practical strategies to differentiate instructions, break down tasks, and cater to the diverse learning styles. We will be sharing our conversations that took place with two music teachers who teach the music technology and have SEND learners. The first recording will be Joel, followed by Ben. But just before we get into the conversations, you may wish to pause the recording now so you can read the range of questions that we covered with them both.
Thank you, Joel, for joining the Provider Development Cert team today to chat about supporting SEND learners on the Level 1-2 Music Technology. As a subject teacher, your insight will be invaluable. So we'll start with our first question, and that is, how do you adapt your curriculum for your SEND learners?
So I found with this question, it's our practices, or at least my practice, is more based around trying to keep the curriculum the same for all learners, and then changing the methods and changing kind of the differentiation and making the standardization so that everyone can learn exactly the same stuff. But it's about how we implement the delivery in the classroom so that SEND learners can understand and retain the same information as their peers. So what we always try to do is probably less about actually adapting the curriculum itself, and about how do we enable all learners to be able to access the same curriculum. And so with that, the first thing that popped up was about the amount of assistance that they have, kind of not only in the classroom, but also as it goes to in one of the other questions in their assessments as well. So it's more about finding the balance between giving them more assistance and the assistance they need to be on the same level as their peers, but not giving them too much assistance so that they're still taking ownership over their work. And in terms of the delivery of that actual curriculum, it's more about finding the right pace. So you need to, we have level 1s and level 2s in the same classroom, and I'm teaching two courses side by side. And in the level 1 and in the level 2, we have SEND learners within both of those levels. So it's about making sure that I can deliver at a pace which is still engaging for the level 2s, but also at a slow enough pace that the level 1s can be able to get all the work down in their books and be able to understand the curriculum and the information they're being given. So that comes with a lot of repetition, making sure that SEND and lower level students can hear the information multiple times. And a good way of doing that I've found is by getting the more comfortable and the higher level learners to actually assist the lower level learners and the SEND learners. So with that, they will go back through some of the work and some of the vocabulary and some of the delivery with the SEND learners, and they will help each other. So there's a couple of ways that not necessarily adapting the curriculum, but allowing a few different methods that are working to help SEND learners to access the curriculum that is already there.
That's great, thank you. And do you take a holistic approach or a linear teaching approach when delivering the content areas?
So in general, and this doesn't just fall to our music qualification that we're delivering with NCFE, but this is across the board. We generally take a very holistic approach to everything that we do at Links Media College, and that doesn't change for the music course that I run. We like to take a holistic approach. We like to think about the individual in every step of the way, and adapt and tailor our approach to the individual as much as possible. Obviously, there's a fine balance between doing that and, you know, making sure that everyone has the same amount of attention, but also the same engagement levels. And if you're adapting to everyone, you want to make sure that no one's left out. And what that can often do is, if you're putting too much time into SEND or lower level learners that are struggling, actually the level 2s and the more able learners are not being engaged and stretched and challenged as much as they need to be. So it's finding that the balance between those. We definitely take a linear approach in terms of the curriculum. So we want everyone to be able to access the same curriculum if possible. And so far it's been working. We haven't adapted the curriculum, we just adapt the methods so we can take a holistic approach to the delivery, but a linear approach to the curriculum that we are delivering.
That's great. And when it comes to the non-exam assessment for your SEND learners, how do you support your learners? For example, you know, a reader, extra time. How would you adapt the delivery of the NEA?
I thought this was a really good question because I think that's something that's often forgotten, like in English and maths functional skills and in other academic subjects that they will be sitting exams for. They will have those parameters to help them. They will have a reader, they will have a scribe, they will have extra time. And I think it's quite a strange one to think about with a vocational and more creative course.
Yeah, it is.
Because when you are running the assessments, they're so different to the exams that they will be sitting. And so, you know, it took a little bit of thought on getting a bit creative about this when we started running the programs a couple of years ago to actually nail this down and make sure that they were getting everything they need. But at the same time, again, I keep saying it, finding that balance, they need to be able to own their own work. They need to be able to be assisted to the right level and not over-assisted. And that's a fine balance because they need to be learning, they need to be retaining information, they need to be able to take ownership over their assessment and sit it properly, but have the right level of assistance. So with that, I found that there's nothing to say that they can't still have a reader. There is a way that they can still have a reader. So in our assessments, all of our learners will provide like screen shares and screencasts and voice their own kind of tutorial to submit for their assessment. And so long as the balance is right in the preparation, so the learner, no matter who they are, puts enough work and takes enough ownership over the preparation of the questions that they want to be asked in their screencast, instead of the other learners that will just go through their whole thing. There's nothing to say that someone can't assist them and read the questions to them that they have already prepared. So there's nothing to say that they can't still have a reader, so long as they have prepared the questions and taken ownership over the preparation themselves. So that's kind of one way that I've looked at it. Something else that I found to be very, very helpful for SEND learners, and also for those that might be taking a level 1 program with us, but might be on entry level for English and maths with us, is to allow them space of time and enough time to come in for their assessment slot where they can have a revision session first, because we find a lot of them that do have like learning delay and just in general, a lot of our SEND learners, it's retaining the information and then being able to recall that information that is the problem. So a quick revision and recap session for them to be able to have some time to prepare before the assessment period actually starts has made them feel a lot more comfortable, that they don't have to overstretch themselves to try and recall information from 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. They can actually sit there and kind of prepare themselves beforehand. That's something that I found to be very, very helpful.
And that'll be for the exam assessment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And there's all the guidance on the NCFE website about, you know, special considerations and reasonable adjustments on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Lovely. My turn to come in then, Joel. Thank you for that. I love the way you're using your higher level learners to support your SEND learners, and also it allows them to consolidate their learning as well, doesn't it, if they're supporting us with it. But also when you talked about the balance of support and maintain the integrity of the assessment by the learners owning the tasks themselves and doing them, it is a fine line, isn't it? And it is a balancing act for you to do really that. So really good points to bring up. Thank you. Talking about challenges, which content areas have you found the most challenging for your SEND learners, and why?
I don't think it's specific content areas. Like I say, because we're running a technology course here and a vocational course that has quite a lot of vocabulary and terminology that are very technical and they're very bespoke to this kind of thing. There's a lot of our learners, in fact, probably most of our learners, that have never heard some of these terminologies and vocabularies before. Again, I would say we have SEND learners and also lower level learners that are studying at maybe entry 3 English, that are taking a level 1 music course. So we've had to adapt and make sure that we can give them enough time to understand vocabulary that they might not be learning in the English class, which is very good for them because it means that it's upskilling them in English, and it's probably very much helping the English class. And those links between English, maths, and music is something that we're very, very keen on trying to like establish those connections in the classroom. But I think, yeah, it's not necessarily about the area of content, it's about the overall content. So those vocabularies and those terminologies, they're things that they probably have never heard before and haven't been challenged with before. So you can imagine those that we have quite a number of learners that have global learning delay, things like that, to be able to understand a much more complex and longer word than you've ever heard before, which is very specific and targeted to the music technology course that you've never done before. And to be able to understand that and then be able to retain that information and then recall that information, it's not possible for them like it is for our other learners. So it's more for me about again, using the level 2s to assist them with that, and making sure that you give enough time to be able to repeat information, allowing enough time for people that might be slower at writing to be able to get the information down in their music book, to be able to look back on it in future. It's about just making those necessary adjustments so that they are given enough time and they are considered, and the impact that that's having on them is considered. I think that's more the challenge.
Yeah, perfect. Because you were talking about them having lower levels of English then, and using technical vocabulary is a higher level English skill. So I guess working with your English teachers as well, so that they can embed that vocabulary into the learning there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first year that we've run the level 1 program. We've been running the level 2 program for the past couple of years, and we've now, obviously it was a struggle because we actually had people that were doing entry 3 or level 1 English, but we had them on a level 2 program, and we were quite successful in that. But we thought we wanted to expand that and make those stepping stones, and then it allows people to also study for 2 years as well. So we have a range of learners across different levels in English and maths. And what's nice is that I've just come across and been delivering a microphones unit for the level 1s. And what it allows them to do is to prepare speaking and listening, because what I've done is embedded their speaking and listening, and instead of them doing a screencast or screen share, they're going to do a presentation to the classroom about microphones. And I've tied in a couple of slides about how this helps, because they'll be doing their English speaking and listening next month. And it's like, this is preparation for your English speaking and listening. That is something that I think is fantastic. You know, being able to embed English and maths. There are times where maths comes into play as well, but that's a really strong connection with the English course. And I was really happy to find that.
Perfect, excellent. And your learners will really benefit from that approach. So please keep it up, Joe. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just to extend that a bit then, what kind of teaching strategies do you use to help the learners apply analysis and evaluation to their own work? Because that's that next step up again, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. We do a lot of recapping and reviewing, and actually both academically and in a pastoral sense. We're very, very heavy on the pastoral side of things here, as well as academia. And the way Catch 22 colleges and ourselves are all set up, we have an R&P officer that runs reviews. I think they're quarterly, or at least 3 times per year. So every learner will have a review with our R&P officer, and that's for both academic and pastoral aims. Those with EHCP have their own enrolment forms with their own aims, which are driven directly from their EHC plan. And that means that a lot of SEND learners, they are constantly reminded of their aims, and also have support sessions to be able to keep on track with them. So I think the way that we deliver that approach, you know, it's very, very beneficial to all learners, but especially those who are SEND learners. The other thing that we really incorporate is we have QR codes on the wall, and at the end of every lesson, every lesson, the learners will scan the QR code, and it's got an evaluation form on there. And so they will fill out what they learned in that lesson. And that enables us and themselves to be able to remind themselves what they've learned in the lesson and in the day. But also it allows us to see what they have picked up and what they haven't picked up, and the R&P officer can then use it in their reviews to be able to go through, you know, some gaps that they might have. So we're trying to almost have the fishing net and not let anyone slip through, and not let any aims slip through, because we've got a tight focus on the SEND and EHCP learners, and ensuring that because they have such a vast array of aims, they've got many, many more aims than our other learners do. It's ensuring that they are, constantly reminded of them, but then also be able to take ownership over them as well.
I love the QR code. That's brilliant. That's a great idea.
It's very,
really like that.
It's allowing them to use their phones in class, so they don't mind that too much.
I mean, that's that's great. And then doing that evaluation every day as well, so they get into that, how do I evaluate my work? That's brilliant. So following on from that, is there any sort of particular teaching approaches that you use for practical activities?
Oh, many, many, many. So a lot of the practical activities that we have here, and I'll go back to the microphones lesson or the microphones unit that I began to teach this week. At times we've got quite small classrooms, so we've got a maximum of 15 in the music class at the moment, and it allows me to be able to go around the classroom with microphones. So I'll deliver on the PowerPoint. It doesn't mean that I'll necessarily have to pull everyone up to one spot to be able to do an activity. It means that I'm able to go around with microphones and kind of deliver the practical lesson and actually go to the learner. So that's probably an area where I benefit as a teacher, having a little bit of a smaller class. What I'm always considering about our SEND learners and practical activities is those with physical disabilities or mobility issues. That's kind of the top of my list. I'm also my focus in our on our site in general was very SEND focused outside of my music teaching. So this is an area where I take a lot of considerations. We haven't had a great number of those with physical disabilities so far in the music class, but when we have, I'm just always mindful of how we need everyone to be able to access the same activity, and I'm very, very mindful that you could easily think that it's accessible to everyone without actually taking full consideration. So what I do like to do is try to make sure that if we're doing something that is a workshop or classroom based or takes any kind of interactivity in that case, trying to make sure that they can do it from where they are and that it's me that makes more of the movement. I do want them to get up. I do want them to move around the classroom, and so far that has been very possible. But for those that we do have which struggle with mobility, it's ensuring that they don't feel left out or feel like they're being treated any differently. And the best way that I've found to do that is for me to make most of the movement. So they can still do practical stuff. They can be in groups. They can be in pairs from where they're sitting or especially where they are. And it just, for me, it's about making sure that no one feels left out or like they're being treated differently. So that's definitely something that we do. Like I say, so far, all of our SEND learners, when it comes to creative and practical tasks, they have been like heavily skilled. It's been more the kind of information-based knowledge that's been more difficult to kind of adapt. But so far, in terms of the more physical or more creatively interactive material, I certainly haven't struggled with that so far.
Right. And then you've talked about screencasts already, but how do you make use of alternative evidence generation approaches? For example, you said screencasts, recording of learning commentary, and how do you prepare your learners with the skills to make use of the alternative approaches to generate evidence?
Well, one thing that I have to give NCFE massive props for is, like, since we started delivering this program, it was made very clear from the start, not only in the tech specs, but also just generally having meetings with different people, for example, Graham, and in our EQAs as well. It's been made very clear that there's so many different methods that are available for assessment and alternative assessment as well. Which is fantastic. It's fantastic to just know you have a bit of creative knowledge to be able to expand what you're doing, and not feel like you have to question what you're doing or take it to someone to say, is this okay? I run a whole lesson on QuickTime Player at the moment. That's the first way I do things. So when we're doing screencasts, it's a very different method, but it's such a worthwhile method. Like, it's so apt for all learners. It allows lower level learners to get that extra little bit of assistance that they need, for example, a scribe or a reader, as it were, in exams. But it also allows level 2s or higher, more comfortable learners to be able to take ownership fully over what they're doing and just be left to their own devices to actually do everything themselves. So that's a really nice balance to have. And like I say, at the moment, when we're using most of the screencast as the alternative method, I will run a session or two solely on QuickTime and the ability to use QuickTime Player to record a screen and do a screen recording. And I will do it myself. So I will take them through myself doing a screen recording. I will run it, and I will label it as a YouTube tutorial. So when they're doing their screencast now, they are aiming to create their own YouTube tutorial, which has to have the learning aims hit within the YouTube tutorial. These young people are all very, they use YouTube all day, every day, too much, as it were. They're trying to use it in the classroom when they're not supposed to be. But these kind of terminologies as something labeled as a YouTube tutorial is something that they are already well versed with. So it makes them then go, okay, I kind of know what that is. I can go and look on YouTube and look at someone doing maybe a Logic YouTube tutorial to see how they do it. But it means that it's not alien to them. So once I've then sat up at the front of the class and I've stood up and I've shown them how I would do a screencast, and I've taken them through, a couple of things in Logic and shown them how I would do it, then I've labeled it as something that they're already quite familiar with. And just that little terminology, YouTube tutorial, it makes them so much more comfortable. And then they actually go, oh, that would be nice, because it gives them a little bit of pride in sitting there and being a YouTube streamer, as it were, to actually do their assessment. So those little things, those little terminologies, those little ways of making them feel more comfortable and making it more relevant to their knowledge base already, I find that really useful. Yeah.
It's great. And then final question, are VCETs a positive learning qualification for SEND learners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing that I'm constantly thinking about at the moment is the pathways, the progression, stepping stones that learners need to take. And it's so difficult. We've got a really good relationship with NCFE, and we've been really happy with how that's been working so far. It was scary to us, but it also got me thinking about those stepping stones and about how we need to try to create that pathway for all learners, but especially for those with with SEND. And actually, a lot of those access courses and those stepping stones have been removed now, and they've been the funding has been taken away from them, and we're actually seeing that a lot of level 1, level 2 embedded courses are appearing, which is really cool. But it's got me to thinking that it would be great if we can continue to open up those stepping stones. And it got me thinking about that entry 3 course and how it would be so cool if there was an entry 3 course that we could offer. So then we could offer entry 3, level 1 and level 2 in the progression. And what that would mean is that we wouldn't be scared to deliver a program to our entry-level English and maths learners. We could actually teach them a music qualification at the level that they're at. And they could stay with us for 3 years, and they could do their entry level, level 1, level 2 English and maths, and they could do the same with music and follow it through the whole way. Not something that is quite possible as we speak right now, but I think that's where offering the VCerts and offering these types of qualifications, it allows the access to learners that might not usually have it. And I've found a lot of our SEND learners are actually excelling really well in music technology, and they're working really well in music technology, and they might not be working as well in English and maths. And it shows that there's a really good path for careers there for SEND learners and lower level learners that might not have had a pathway mapped out for them before. And now I've got people talking about being audio engineers or do what I do for a living and being inspired by what they're seeing in their music class. And they've never thought about their career up until this point, and they might be 17, 18, 19 years old. So with that evidence, I think just generally creating stepping stones for our SEND learners and ensuring that they have the ability to take longer to achieve that level 2 qualification, but at the end of it have the same progression routes as some of their peers. I think that is so incredibly important, and it's right at the top of my list at the moment.
That's really good. That's really positive to hear that the VCerts, are making a great impact on your teaching and your learners as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you, Joel. Your insight today has been invaluable. Really great to, hear how you support your SEND learners. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben, for joining the Provider Development VCert team today to chat about supporting SEND learners on the level 1-2 qualification in music technology. As a subject teacher of this qualification in this subject area, your insight's going to be invaluable. So I'm going to start with our first question. Okay. How do you adapt your overall curriculum for SEND learners, Ben?
So it's a big one to start with, isn't it?
Isn't it?
I think what we try to do is make everything as inclusive as possible. So rather than trying to think about what can we do for that individual, we think how can we adapt what we do so everybody can be involved.
Yeah.
Particularly with music technology, we try to make a lot of it discussion based as well, because it's a very intense isn't quite the right word. There's a lot of technology to get your head around and sort of
Yes.
processes to understand how to do something.
Yes.
So before you can apply that, you have to understand how to do it. So we find that having discussions as a class where we can sort of get people's insights, so we can get sort of a level of prior knowledge. So we see what people know already, and then using that, we can sort of think about the vocabulary that we've used as well. And usually, a student or some students might know what it is, but not know the right word. And then we can help them as teachers model that. And so we can take that classroom discussion into modeling a process. So if we're talking about something specific like EQ, for example, if we're trying to apply EQ to a piece of music, we can talk about what that means and then show them. So we use our whiteboard and put our display up on the whiteboard so we can live model it and then they can see it in action. Lots of things to do with music tech and that sort of thing, sort of like EQ and reverb. Like I say, it's about applying the understanding and it's about your interpretation of how you want to use it as well. So there's the understanding of what it is and then applying it musically to the piece of work. And again, by showing them and having that discussion, that helps to sort of make everything more inclusive rather, like I say, rather than saying, right, for this student, we have to do this, for this student, we have to do that.
So you find it's best practice for all your learners rather than only your SEND learners then? Perfect. And you've brought in the actual content areas there. Do you take a holistic or a linear teaching approach when you deliver the content areas?
More of a holistic approach. When we first looked at this specification, obviously we looked at all the different content areas to go through, and we thought, we started actually by looking at how it linked into the previous spec to see, well, what can we borrow from what we've already got planned? And we felt that by thinking about it holistically and not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was a better approach because the content in content area 1, some of it is perhaps a bit drier because it's more of the theory, some of it's more theory or it's to do with the roles and responsibilities rather than sort of the music making. So what we found is by looking at some music making in some form, whether it be a recording session or talking about MIDI techniques, we can bring in those other things from content area 1 alongside it. So it's much more holistic rather than linear.
Perfect. And I'm guessing your learners will see more relevance in the links between the content areas as well and how they link to each other and impact on each other.
Yeah. We find if the more practical we can make it, the more engaged the students are. And they want to do it. If we sit there and say, right, today is all theory and you're going to get your pens out and you're going to do this, then they can switch off. But if we talk about in a recording studio session, we say, right, you're going to have some engineers, you're going to have a producer, you've got some people, what are they going to do? What is their role?
Yes.
So, or who would do that?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and do you adapt your delivery of the NEA for your SEND learners? For example, when they have readers or extra time, is there anything else that you do to adapt the NEA tasks?
Yeah, the task itself isn't adapted, but how they are supported might adapt. So yeah, if a student is allowed a reader or a prompter, then we can have those people in the classroom with us. This is obviously the second year through now with this new specification, and we're looking at how we adapt the model of delivery to make it what we think is better for the students as well. So we're trying to do it in bigger chunks of time rather than just lesson time.
Yes.
All the students are using computers anyway, so they're all able to type, which allows them all the students to access, because some of the access requirements are to use a laptop or a computer. So that's again.
Do you have any learners have extra time?
We do. This does cause a little bit of trouble.
Yes, how do you adapt and respond to that?
So what we look at is we work out the required amount of extra time per task. So rather than saying, right, they've got 19 hours in total, what's 25% of 19? We break the task down. So the research task, task 1 and task 2 all have 2 hours. So we give them an extra half an hour, and that's tagged on to the end of their slot, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
when now this it's a bit complicated. Things always are. So when some students would be moving on to the next task, if the students of extra time wish to have extra time, they can carry on with that task before they move on. So they will ultimately have all their extra time and they will finish later than the other students, but they're working alongside the students as we go. We keep a check on the time, and we kept a spreadsheet last year indicating when if students were absent, if we had to get them back to catch up with time, if they're allowed extra time. So we had all that color coded, so it was really easy for us to see that how much time the students had along the way. So
perfect.
When we get into the end of task 1, end of research task, we'll say, right, everyone, you need to move on. If you're allowed extra time, your extra half hour starts now if you wish to, and then half an hour later we'll say, right, now you must move on to the next task.
Right. Excellent. Did you find any of the content areas more challenging for your SEND learners?
It's really anything that requires lots of writing.
Yes.
That's the challenge, and I think that's the biggest sort of hurdle for the NEA. It's getting them to put it down and explaining what they're trying to do, because they can sometimes demonstrate their understanding through doing it, through the practical activity. They sometimes struggle to explain how they've gone about it and why they've done it. So
in written form,
in the written form, yeah. And I know there's the question about using other means of recording that, and we've looked at that in the past, and we found that the challenge for them as well is they also can't verbalize it without maybe prompts. And so in not this specification, but in a previous specification, we tried to do it like an interview where we would give them the questions, but in order for that to be successful, we had to get them to script what they were going to write. So we thought, well, hang on, if they're going to have to script what they're going to write, there's not much point in doing it as an interview.
Yes. Yes, makes sense. The writing it anyway.
Yeah, and particularly with this specification, now the NEA has a fixed time limit. We find actually it's more of a challenge to use alternative forms like blogs or video recording, screen capture. That's actually as hard or harder than asking them to try and put it into Word.
Yes. Right, excellent. And are there any content areas that you found more challenging to teach? And do you have any strategies that you could share about how you overcame any challenges you had?
Yeah, I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about particularly content area 1. It's not doing it linear. It's making it showing how it links into something else. So it's showing
making it come
context.
To life, sort of thing.
Yeah. So when we're talking about studio recording, there's stuff in content area 1 about the development of music technology recording and how it's gone from analog to digital and sort of different tracks. So doing that in isolation can be a bit dry. But if we talk about, right, we're going to be doing some studio recording, so we're going to look at how we use the DAW and how we got all these tracks available. Or if we think back into the 1950s, this is what they had available, then it moved forward. So if we can show them how things progress to what we have now, it makes it more practical, makes it more engaging. So I think, anything which is theory-based, if you can make it practical and show the relevance, it's much more engaging.
To learn it in a context rather than just this is the theory. Brilliant. Sounds perfect. And then I'm going to dig a bit deeper about teaching strategies now as well. Do you use anything in particular to help the learners apply analysis and evaluation in their work?
We do. We do lots of modelling, like I said, not just practically, but also with written work. So we might talk about how we would talk through and walk them through how you might do an answer for a question or an evaluation. So we can talk about making a point about something and explaining that further. And we've used color-coded paragraphs. So we might put together a paragraph and show them in different colours, like, this is the point I'm trying to make, this is the evidence, this is where you might see it, and this is my explanation a little bit deeper about how it's relevant, how it links back to maybe the brief, if it's the NEA, or if it's a question in an exam about would you use MIDI, or would you use a live person? So we try and sort of break it down and model it.
Yeah, I love that color code, and it sounds like the identify is one color, the apply is another color, and then the why, or the analysis, is another color. I love that.
Yeah. I think when if you just give them a paragraph of words to look at, it's just a bunch of words. But if you've got different colors, you can clearly look at the sections, and you can say, right, if you look at the green section, if you look at the red section, look at the blue section, it's really easy and clear for the students to see. And then when you can also then highlight those key sort of bits of vocabulary and key terms that you need to bring in.
Perfect. I love a bit of color, and I mean that's going to benefit all learners that you work with.
Exactly. Yeah, it comes back to that whole inclusivity. So rather than individualizing, it's that inclusivity, what's best actually for everyone, not what is going to work for them, but actually why wouldn't that work for everyone else as well. We also again with modeling, we use that kind of I do, we do, you do kind of modeling as well, so that I can demonstrate a practical activity, then we can do it together, so they can talk me through it. I might pick some people, say, right, what was the first step, how do we do that, and then we can send them off to apply it themselves. Because the best way, and I remember a piece of feedback from one of my students actually that said they remember it much better if they actually are doing it and not just being talked at as well. So giving the opportunity to apply it once they've been shown it is much better. But yeah, I do, we do, you do is a really good model to use.
Excellent. Sounds really interesting and really engaging for them. Do you have any teaching approaches, top tips for practical activities and how you might adapt them?
Yeah, I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, but always modelling, always good. Certainly begin with as well scaffolding and reducing the support as you move through the course. So we find when it comes to things like composing, they might struggle with understanding how chords work and how chord progressions work and how harmony works. So we've got some worksheets and some templates that we could use to help them understand how to construct a piece of music. And then as we move through the course and we sort of do different tasks, we can reduce the level of scaffolding down because it can then improve their independence.
Excellent, lovely, thank you. My next question is a bit more in depth. Do you make use of any alternative evidence generation approaches? For example, and we've talked about podcasts, haven't you already? Do you use any recordings of learning commentary, screencasts? And how do you prepare your learners with the skills to make use of these alternative approaches?
Yeah, we found them quite challenging, as I mentioned. We found that in order to get the best ones, when we've done this in the past, the best ones were always when they were scripted, which lost a bit of the kind of natural and sort of spontaneous flow of it, because they're kind of very much reading from a script sort of thing. And we found that the amount of time it took. So we found by preparing them well in how to write an answer, we found that was more productive, because otherwise we found the engagement got a bit lost because of redoing what they've already done, if that makes sense.
Yes, it needs to be short and sharp and snappy and in one take.
I do think they are really good, and I think if you've got a learner who is really good at able to recall things and has got that real understanding, but really struggles putting things into word, I really think that things like blogs and podcasts are probably really good and be really, really excellent. And I think the best way to prepare, I think, would be for them to make some bullet points to make sure they know what they have to cover. But it's that as long as they can then expand on those bullet points and don't just sort of regurgitate exactly what they've written.
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything that you do that you haven't had the chance to share or reflect on for everybody? We've talked about everything that you do, what you thought of.
We've done pretty well, actually.
Brilliant.
I think the key thing we found was about creating a practical task, an activity where they could apply their understanding. And that was really important, because when it comes to the NEA, they've kind of got to amalgamate a bunch of those things, and they've got to be able to recall and retrieve that knowledge and understanding. So making sure that we can create new tasks where things overlap as well. So for example, we do a composition where we focus on MIDI editing, then we do a studio recording so we can focus on audio editing, and then we've got something else where we're doing a soundscape, which requires them to use knowledge from the MIDI and the audio, because they're creating things again, but in a slightly different context. So
yes,
I think practical activities, and it doesn't even need to be like a full project. It could be like a mini composition or a mini project. Which we do that with GCSE music as well as music technology. We don't always create a full piece of music, but I think that's a piece of advice I would give. Try and make it as practical as possible, and look at how you can apply the theory to a practical activity.
Excellent, lovely, thank you. And so before we finish, how do you feel, how positive a learning experience or a qualification the V-Certs are for SEND learners?
I think they're really good. I think they allow them to engage in a practical way, which I think certainly I would say the majority of our SEND learners find the practical activities much more engaging, and the more they can do that way is better for them. As I mentioned, the hardest part I think for them is the written content.
Yes.
But other than that, I think the content is great. I really enjoy teaching the spec as well. I think it's really good for them.
Excellent. Anything else you'd like to share before we finish?
No, I can't think of anything else that I found. I'm sure I will in about 10 minutes.
Wonderful. Well, what we'll do, thank you so much for this, Ben. You know, you're sharing your experiences and knowledge and strategies are just so useful for providers, you know, every provider, but especially new providers to our V-Cert. So we really do appreciate your time. So thank you so much for this.
No problem at all.
Now, hopefully the conversations have given you lots of hints and tips to take away for your learners. Please do get in touch if you would like to share any of your own teaching experiences supporting SEND learners in your classroom, or for any further advice or support from the provider development team. Now, thank you for watching. Please do leave your feedback. We do value your insights into our future development of our on-demand events.